Welcome, everyone, to episode 10 of the True Crime All the Time podcast. Gibby is in the studio. What's going on?
That's a good day, man.
It's always a good day when we're recording.
I like being in the studio right now. It's very cold outside.
Yeah, it's 10 degrees where we are?
Something like that. Maybe a little chillier.
Yeah, it's very cold. So a couple of shout outs. Got to give a shout out to Cassie Pearson. She did a great Scott Peterson meme. And Gibby, everybody knows how much we love memes.
I love those memes.
Yeah,
I do. And she did a great job.
We've got to keep them coming. We love them. We didn't even know what a meme was, I don't think, before we started this podcast, and now we're infatuated with memes.
Yeah, Jordan got us rolling on them.
Yep. Jordan started this whole meme craze for us. Then a very special shout out to Sarah. Sarah's our newest Patreon supporter. And I can't thank you enough, Sarah, for deciding to financially support the show. It really makes a big difference. So you too can help support the show for as little as $2 a month by going to our Patreon page. You'll find the Patreon link and all of our contact information on our website at truecrimeallthetime.com. If you love the show, please remember to rate and review us on iTunes. In 2016, California wife and mother Sherry Papini disappeared for 22 days. When she was found, she told authorities a detailed account of being kidnapped and tortured. Years later, in a stunning twist, Papini pled guilty to making false statements about what happened to her, setting off a media firestorm. Now, for the first time, Sherry Papini is telling her side of the story and revealing shocking new information. Sherry Papini, Caught in a Lie, an ID documentary event, Monday, May 26th at 9 on ID. Set your DVR. So we have a few big announcements to make. The first is that the Wednesday after this episode airs, we will be releasing our first listener co-hosted episode. It will basically be very similar to our regular episodes, but we'll have a TCAT listener on with us who is from the area and familiar with the case, and they should be able to add some great information to the episode. I have 4 or 5 other people that have expressed interest in doing this. If you're out there listening and you have a lesser known case that you're familiar with or that occurred in your area and you think you'd like to come on with us and be part of this new listener co-hosted episode segment, definitely reach out to us. I don't know exactly how often we'll do this. A lot of it will depend on, what kind of demand we have. But, we want to get this first one out there and see what people think of it. So the second announcement is pretty big, and it's that Gibby and I are starting a new podcast. The podcast shares the name True Crime All the Time, but this one is Unsolved. So basically it's the same logo where it just has a stamp on it that says Unsolved that kind of runs through the clock. And what we did is we made the decision that we're going to stick with solved cases on the regular TCAT show that we've been doing. And then we're just going to start a new TCAT Unsolved that looks strictly at unsolved cases. So if all goes according to plan, the first episode will drop on Sunday, the 22nd. The show should be out on iTunes sometime this week for you to subscribe to. But we will definitely make the announcement again on next week's True Crime All the Time. Like I said, it'll have the same logo. It'll just have an unsolved stamp running through it. So for all of you out there on social media, that keep saying you wish we would put out more episodes, hopefully this will help satisfy that true crime craving. I know we're really excited about it. It's something we've talked about for a little while, and we hope you like it. And then the last announcement is that we should be offering up some True Crime All the Time merchandise for sale in the near future. So definitely be on the lookout for that announcement on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm sure we'll make an announcement on the podcast episode right before we're ready to unveil. But a lot of people have been asking for merchandise, and we're going to get some.
Nothing better than to listen to your true crime all the time while you're sipping a cup of coffee out of your true crime all the time mug.
You know what I found? I'm going to give this is top secret, but what I found was what they call a rescue whistle for people to put on their keychain.
Well, the one high-pitched noise
Yeah,
thing?
if they run into any problems, and it's going to say true crime all the time. So, I mean, what goes better with you've just listened to a scary episode of True Crime all the time.
Yeah.
You've got to go out. It's dark at night. You got your rescue whistle attached to your key ring. That's a no-brainer right there.
Right there.
All right, Gibby, are you ready to get into this bizarre true crime story?
I am. It's definitely a little different.
It's different for us in a couple of ways. Number one, it's a case of workplace violence, and we haven't done one of those. There's a lot of them out there, and I'm sure this won't be the last one that we do. It is a little different for us. So today we are talking about the case of Alton Nolen, who in 2014 would commit a very brutal homicidal rampage at the place that he worked. Strangely, and Gibby, you and I talked about this before we went on air, this is the second story. We're 10 episodes in, and this is the second story that we're doing on a man named Alton. And to me, that's not a name that I hear a lot.
No, it's a pretty rare name.
Yeah, kind of interesting factoid, I guess.
Yeah, the fact that you get two murderers with that name is pretty bizarre.
Yeah. So a little bit about Alton Nolen. He was born in 1984, and he grew up in a very rough neighborhood of Idabel, Oklahoma. Gibby, I don't know if you looked at anything, but I did a little bit of research on Idabel because I'd never heard of it. I'm not overly familiar with Oklahoma, so I wanted to do a little bit of research on it. But, it's a small town. Looks like maybe 7,000 to 10,000 people.
Haven't been there. Been to Oklahoma.
So one place you have not been.
I've been in Oklahoma, but, Oklahoma City. But, never heard of the place.
Yeah, I hadn't either. It's located in the southeast corner of the state. One thing that I did read about Idabel was that it had some rough parts to it.
Okay.
And Alton Nolen would grow up in this kind of rough part of Idabel. That apparently there was a lot of crime and there were a lot of murders that took place.
So another person that grew up in a tough area, tough neighborhood, probably a tough childhood, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I could not find a lot about his childhood, which we found in a lot of cases. We've been able to detail out people's childhoods much better in some of our other cases. But, some of the things that I did find were that, so as I said, this is a very, very small town, 7,000 to 10,000 people.
Right.
And it had a lot of murders. So that's pretty strange for usually
such a low populated area.
For such a low population. And childhood friends later on after the incident that we're going to talk about, they would say that Alton was filled with anger and resentment and that he had a temper and a tendency towards violence from a very early age.
And that tends to come from the way you're raised.
Upbringing usually has
something in your early life causes that.
Right.
I think.
I mean, you're talking nature versus nurture there, and
right.
We don't know exactly what it was, but obviously there was something in him that caused him to be filled with a lot of anger and resentment. But a very interesting fact about this very small town of Idabel was that two of Alton's childhood friends would also turn out to be murderers.
Really?
Yeah, I found it very strange. So he had a friend that was found guilty. So these are childhood friends that are later turned out to be murderers. He had one friend that was found guilty of murder in 2013, having killed his boss at a Sonic restaurant.
So another workplace violence?
Yeah. And that's strange.
Right.
So a little connection there. Apparently, he shot her multiple times, starting with a point-blank shot to the back of her head. He stole the day's deposits for the Sonic restaurant that she had on her. That's the first friend.
Right.
So this friend he ultimately pled guilty and was sentenced to life, and I assume he's still...
For $9,000 and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can talk about the craziness of that, but...
Makes a lot of sense.
So the second friend, childhood friend that he had, murdered a woman in her bathtub. And apparently he and another accomplice, stabbed this woman multiple times and killed her. I just found it very strange that, these are childhood friends of his. They grew up in the same neighborhood, and apparently they grew up in the same situation.
So clearly this was a pretty rough neck of the woods, I'm guessing.
By all indications.
I don't know the area, so I don't know if you call it projects. I don't know if you call it just, the neighborhood. But for three people that knew each other that ended up committing these crimes like that.
Well, that would be weird. To me, that would be weird in a big town. But in a town the size of 7,000 to 8,000, 9,000, whatever it is, to have three childhood friends, there's something there.
Yeah, I don't have any childhood friends that have done anything like that, right?
Yet
that we know of. But I do know and have, I've known people either because I worked with them or lived across the street or in the same neighborhood with them that's committed murder.
Right.
Right. We haven't got into those. We've kind of dust over a few of them, but
right. But these weren't your
these
childhood friends
that I used to play football with or anything like that.
So let's start off, as we like to do, playing clips. Let's start off with the 911 call, and then we'll talk about what we hear.
Shut the door.
More 911. Where's your emergency?
Vaughn Foods, Moore, Oklahoma, 216 Northeast 12th Street.
What's going on there?
We have someone attacking someone in the building. I was just informed. I'm in the...
Okay, where are they at?
Inside. Are they in the office? They're in the office. Front office of the building.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear a lot of screaming. We're actually in a different office, but someone just come here yelling.
315. Okay, do you know where they're at in the building?
In the front of the building, there's our main entrance.
Okay, do you know where he is at in the plant?
We know that he's loose. He has stabbed someone.
Yeah, we've got medical en route to them.
Okay.
Is anybody with him, or do you know?
Hold on, my
For
phone just
respond on
went up.
lacerations, Vaughn
Okay,
216, go ahead, sir. 216 Northeast
I'm going to
12.
put you on speakerphone 1 second, okay?
Stand by on a map page, 1608, timeout.
Okay, so we don't know where the person went. He went through our front office, went to the shipping office, he
Okay.
stabbed a woman in our customer service department.
Okay, did he know her? Do you know, is that who he was arguing with? Is
we
she an
don't
employee?
know. She is an employee, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Lock that door.
Yeah, go ahead and lock everybody in there if you can.
Yeah, we're trying. Okay. Can you hear this in the background?
Is that him? He's back?
Yeah, it sounds like he's running around out here.
Okay.
And that's a gunshot.
Got gunshot.
Sure.
Units responding to Vaughn Foods. We do now have gunshots. Okay, do you know where he's at now?
He's in the hallway outside of the center of the building.
He's in the hallway in the center of the building.
We can hear the 911 call, and we hear them talking about Alton Nolen going through the Vaughn Foods.
Right.
And ultimately kind of ending up with gunshots. So let's talk a little bit about what happened this didn't take very long.
No, it happened fairly fast.
Right. Alton Nolen enters the Vaughn Foods, and he immediately encounters 54-year-old Colleen Hufford.
Right.
In the I think some type of administrative office. what I got from the research, Gibby, and correct me as we go, but he encountered her like from behind, like came up on her from behind.
Right.
And completely severed her head with a knife, like probably reaching around.
Yeah, I think he had a paring knife and he reached around and slit the neck and then continued to sever the head.
We're going to talk about what kind of story this became, but
right.
Yeah, I mean, this was, not to be too graphic, but it was a decapitation, right? It was a beheading, if you want to call it that.
Right.
So a little bit about Colleen. She was from Moore, Oklahoma. She was born in Germany, probably on an Air Force base. It doesn't say that, but she had lived in Montana and was raised in Montana. She married her husband in Montana, and then they settled in Moore, Oklahoma. They had a daughter. Colleen was an avid hockey fan. I guess what I read is, above all, she just had a real joy of life, and she was especially close with her family and most of all, her granddaughter. So we try to talk about the victims as much as we can, because we don't want to make all of these podcasts just about the person that perpetrates the criminal act. So he's decapitated Colleen Hufford.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, he runs into another employee.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know, do you want to step back a little bit, talk about how it brewed up to this point?
Yeah, we definitely can. There was a couple of things, and I've got it a little farther down in my notes.
Right.
But we can do it now, because there was different reasons that led up to this altercation, or it's not an altercation, it's a rampage.
Right.
True Crime All the Time is sponsored by BetterHelp. Folks, therapy can feel like a big investment, but let's think about the state of your mind. It's just as important as your physical health. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session, which adds up really fast. But with BetterHelp Online Therapy, you can save, on average, up to 50% per session. With BetterHelp, you pay a flat fee for weekly sessions, saving you big on cost and time. And you get quality care at a price that makes sense and can help you with anything from anxiety to everyday stress. Your mental health is worth it, and now it's within reach. I've used the BetterHelp service for years, and I love the fact that, I can connect with a therapist in a comfortable spot in my home on my laptop. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/TCAT today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/TCATT. Even the smallest step forward can make a big difference in your financial future. When you open a Chime checking account, you're one step closer to a better financial future with no maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, or getting paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. Making progress has never been easier. I think we've all been in that position where we've had an overdraft. Well, with Chime, you can overdraft up to $200 with no fees. That's amazing. And they have over 50,000 fee-free ATMs. Make progress towards a better financial future with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/TCAT. That's chime.com/TCATT. Chime feels like progress. Banking services and debit card provided by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A., members FDIC. Spot me eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Fees apply at out-of-network ATMs. MyPay eligibility requirements apply. Credit limits range from $20 to $500. $2 fee applies to get funds instantly. Crime checking account required. Go to chime.com/disclosures for details. Originally, the police would put out a statement that said that Nolen had just been terminated from the Vaughn Foods, because he worked there. So this is September 2014, And right after this happens, they put out a statement saying he'd been terminated. But later on, they would correct that from the research that I did and say that he had been suspended. So you've got that. That's one factor. And then I think the factor that you're probably referring to the most is his issues with Tracy Johnson.
Yeah. Basically the reason he got suspended. So what do we know? We know that he is employed there. He's supposed to be working, and Tracy is been on the job for 3 or 4 days, right? She just was released from prison. She did some, and it's unrelated, but it's a good point to bring out. She just came out of prison from some check fraud issues, and she served some time for that. This is her first job, and I believe this is her 4th day into it, and she's working on the assembly line, and she sees Alton, he's there, but he's goofing off, he's not working, and she's not afraid to say something, and she says, you need to do your job, get busy, not just stand around and goofing off. She basically tells him, you're lazy. Well, of course he doesn't like that. And so he makes some comments and makes some racial comments towards her. Basically, says something like, I don't like white people, and a few other comments. So,
that's what leads to her
right.
filing the complaint.
She goes to HR, files that complaint.
Right.
Somebody else also files a complaint. So then they pull him in to get his story. And at that point, he gives his story as well. And at that point, they decide to put him on suspension. So he's told to leave.
Because one thing we haven't talked about. So Alton Coleman, there you go. I knew I was going to say Alton Coleman.
See, you thought it was going to be me.
I know. I did think it was going to be you. Alton Nolen was Muslim.
He was.
And there was a lot of information that he had been trying to convert some of his fellow employees. And I don't know if that also led to the
I think it was
suspension or was a contributing
I think it was a
factor.
combination that he was making religious comments and also making racial comments.
Right.
So it was a combination of.
And we're going to talk a lot more about the fact that he's Muslim and how that plays into this story, because it becomes a huge
after fact. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he leaves, goes home, and he returns within 15 minutes. So he's not gone very long, right?
No, and I have that he brings back a large bladed knife. You said paring knife.
Yeah.
And when I think paring knife, that's something that I use, the little thing to cut up an apple.
Right. But that's, everything that I read, he went home and got a paring knife. So I don't know what his paring knife looked like.
Right. What I have is a large bladed knife that you'd use to cut up like heads of lettuce.
Right. So a chef's knife, chopping knife, or whatever they call that.
I don't know. I think it would, not that you couldn't do it, but a paring knife would have maybe be a little tough to.
Right.
I mean, you could do that with anything that's sharp enough, I guess.
But there's no pictures of the evidence out there, so there's no way for us to actually see the size of the.
Yeah, we're just going by.
Knife, but we're just going off what the different media stories released.
But I think the key is that he's pissed off.
Yeah.
He's just been suspended. He goes home, gets a knife, because we know that, and at this point he returns to Vaughn Foods for revenge.
Right.
I think that's pretty well known.
And he's got a history of, like you said, right? He's got a history of rage,
right,
according to his friends, right? And where he grew up, and then
so
he and I don't know when we're going to dive into it, but he's got a history.
And I think let's finish with the actual what happens at Vaughn Foods, and then we're going to talk about his history and some of the other things. But because he's already gone back, we already talked about Colleen Hufford. And it was important that you took that detour, because the next person that he encounters is Tracy Johnson.
Right.
And that's the reason why you wanted to take that detour, because it sets it up. My understanding is that he had 3 targets. The first one was Tracy Johnson. That's the individual that had, in his eyes, probably gotten him suspended. The other two, I couldn't find their names, and maybe you have them, but I didn't have them. But it's irrelevant because they were not injured. He never got far enough to get to them in the plant.
I think it was he wanted to go after the two individuals that made the complaint, and then the HR person. So,
and that would make sense because in his mind, if it's revenge and it's all about this suspension, it's the people that caused it and it's the people that carried it out. But let's go back to Colleen Hufford, because she wasn't a part of any of it.
No, she was just in the old saying, in the
wrong place at the wrong time. She just happened to be the first person that he encountered, and because of that, unfortunately, she lost her life.
Right. And so the interesting part is, he does what he did to her. He comes up behind from her, slits the throat, cuts the head off, right? However that motion happened. She put up a struggle. I mean, she kicked over some chairs in the office.
I can't imagine that anybody wouldn't.
Right.
In that scenario.
And you could tell in the room she was in, you could tell there was a little bit of struggle. So meanwhile, Tracy, she's back in the locker room changing clothes into her shift, and she can hear the screaming. She says that she doesn't realize, she thinks it was just people messing around. She didn't know it was something severe. So she hears that, and then she comes out and she walks into that office, and she sees the first victim laying there, but you can't tell that the head's been severed, right? You just see a lot of blood.
I imagine it had to have been a lot of blood.
So it like it would anybody, it freaked her out, and there was a lot of commotion going on. She says at that point she went back to the locker room to retrieve something, and then she wanted to go back and sit with the victim till help arrived. On her way to returning back to that office, that's when she came face to face with Alton. And at that point, that's when, you got more details, but I believe that's the point when he rushes to her, and she basically says that he's 5 feet away, but once he makes his move, it's like within a second and a half, 2 seconds, he's on her, and she freezes because she just doesn't know how to react to it. And within that time, he takes the knife to her right side of her neck.
Yeah, I mean, he's trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, he's trying to do the same thing, and he tries to, he's millimeters away from hitting the major artery, right? And at that point, that's when the other coworker / part-time sheriff takes his shot.
Yeah, so he slashed Tracy up.
Yeah.
He wanted to do the same thing to her that he had just done to Colleen, but as you said, and it was actually the company's CEO, Mark Vaughn. So Vaughn Foods.
Vaughn Foods, yeah.
He's obviously family, but he happened to be a reserve deputy with the Oklahoma County Sheriff's Department, and for whatever reason, he had a rifle. I don't know if he kept it for protection in the office, but he shot Nolen with the rifle, and that's what stopped the attack. And you can hear that on the 911 because there's some loud pops, and somebody says, those are gunshots. Getting back to Tracy, and I guess Alton Nolen, for that matter, they were hospitalized, but ultimately they both survived.
Yeah, I think that's kind of strange. I think for both of them, they were in the same hospital. I mean, small town. I have the town of Moore, right?
Yeah, Moore, Oklahoma.
Moore, Oklahoma. So I'm guessing it's probably doesn't have a lot of hospitals. This is probably the Trauma One Center that they have in the area.
I don't know. We're going to get in trouble now because
somebody will let us know.
Every time we talk about towns, people say we're ignorant because we don't know how big they are. And
most towns have their Trauma One centers that people that they would send this type of medical emergency to. And Tracy makes the comment that she was uneasy knowing that the person that tried to kill her was just, a few doors down.
Wouldn't you be?
Absolutely, I would be.
There's no doubt.
So
Tracy does make a recovery, and we actually have a clip of her. So let's listen to that.
He started slicing my neck and got a hold of my face and got a hold of my right index finger and wouldn't stop. And I'm screaming for help and didn't think anybody was going to come around. He got a millimeter away from my jugular cord. To me, it would happen quickly, but it seemed to last forever.
So that's scary.
Yeah.
I mean, I can only imagine what it must have been like for her. And you mentioned kind of freezing, and to see what she saw and the amount of blood, and then to see this man now coming after her, I think a lot of people not trained in that type of response would do the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, and I have a feeling she's kind of she can be tough or stand her ground, because she wasn't afraid to speak her mind to him about him not doing his job, and for him to quit being lazy.
Which we all want to do.
Yeah. Well,
from time to time.
Right. So she didn't have that problem speaking up, and I don't know if that's because she was new on the job and she didn't want to be worried about losing her job because someone wasn't doing their share, or because, like I said, she did do a small stint in prison, and maybe that toughened her up a little bit, and she felt that, she wasn't going to let anybody, railroad her.
And maybe it's what saved her life too.
It might have. So
maybe she was tough, and even though she froze for a while, she didn't let him. Now, also, you got to give credit to Mark Vaughn, because without him,
absolutely,
she probably does not survive.
Yeah, I don't believe she would be here today, and I think she understands that too.
And really, if you think about it, not just her. If Mark Vaughn doesn't have this rifle and is able to put Alton Nolen down, I mean, we're probably talking about
3 or 4 other people.
Many more people.
Right.
So it was a good guy with a gun that stopped a bad guy, which is also a podcast that may be coming out soon. Just to throw that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think Tracy today, she still feels the blame for some of this, because she's the one that made the initial complaint against him, and she feels that, this is what caused his rage. And so I think she feels, bad because what happened to.
And I think that's natural, but not warranted, right? I mean, her actions led to this, but they shouldn't have.
Right.
Right. She didn't bring this on.
It wasn't her fault.
Solely on the shoulders of Alton Nolen and his decision making. So now I think, Gibby, we get to the criminal record, because you kind of touched on it a little bit, and it's important to talk
I think so.
about Alton Nolen, because he did have a criminal record. He was convicted on drug charges, and I know you've got some good notes on the years and stuff, but what was that? 2000.
Well, yeah,
probably multiple
ones. I mean, the first thing was that, he was arrested in 2006 for having cocaine and the intent to distribute it. So that's his first thing on his record, and that's a pretty big. Cocaine and trying to distribute it.
Well, yeah. When you get intent to distribute, that's usually pretty serious.
And then he gets arrested again in 2009 for possession of marijuana, which is really today not as big as it used to be. But he
it's legal in
now
a lot of places.
So many states have it legal. So, but he gets arrested for possession of marijuana and also driving with a suspension license. But then in 2010. That's the big one.
This is the big one. And this is the one I really want to talk about, because there's some fascinating aspects to this one.
He has a traffic stop. He decides that, and I get you have more information on this one, but it's a female officer, right?
Yes. It is a female officer that stops him. And, I don't have the specifics on it, but the end result is that he overpowers her, beats her up, or he's charged with battery.
Yeah, battery and assault.
This altercation with the police officer. We're going to hear from this police officer a little bit, but at this point, she could have shot him. And she didn't, because he kind of beat her up and fled.
It was a 12-hour manhunt.
Yeah, and then ensues this 12-hour manhunt. He's ultimately captured, but he escapes detention in 2011. But he ultimately serves 2 years of a 6-year sentence, and he's released in 2013. But I want to go back to this 2010 incident because it is really interesting, and I've got a clip of the police officer talking about her interaction with Nolen.
It's not something that any law enforcement officer wants to do, and at the time when we struggled, there was a brief flash of time that I would have actually had the opportunity to do that and would have been within my rights to do that. And of course, looking back, if there was any way I could have known that and could have prevented the tragedies that happened 2 days ago, I definitely would have done that. Well, I had planned to take the day off, so I was in the yard in the garden, and Channel 4 called me, and our local Channel 4 here in town, and they called me and told me what was going on, and they said, this is the same guy. We're looking at OSCN.net, and we're looking and seeing that this guy is the same one that assaulted a trooper back in October of 2010 out by the town of Langston, and we had a big manhunt for him. And I said, that was me. I was the trooper that he assaulted. And as soon as I realized what was going on, and they said that he had possibly beheaded somebody, I got goosebumps all over my body. So all I could do was just thank God that he didn't kill me when he had the chance to do so. And then, of course, later, as I began to think about it, then I was just overcome with guilt that I didn't take the opportunity to kill him when I had the chance to do so.
So, Gibby, you can really hear in her voice that you can hear the struggle with the fact that she possibly could have killed this man back in 2010 when he assaulted her. That would have ultimately meant that the killing that happened in 2014 would not have occurred. She says she was well within her rights, and she would have been, because you assault a police officer, and most of the time you're going to get shot. But she didn't, for whatever reason. Obviously, there was no way for her to know that these events were going to unfold 4 years later. And I feel bad for her because you can tell that she's really carrying around a lot of guilt about this. And again, kind of like we talked about Tracy Johnson, it's probably hard not to feel some guilt in these situations. But ultimately, the decision-making of Alton Nolen is what led to the incident in 2014. All these things that happened before, although both the policewoman and Tracy Johnson may feel some guilt about it,
right?
They shouldn't.
No, he was just a bad individual,
yeah.
Right? Like you said, he did his time. He was also ordered to do anger management classes, upon his release. And I don't know if he completed those. Clearly, he didn't learn anything from them. If he
did complete them, they didn't help.
And then we know that the previous job before working at Vaughn, he also was released from that job for having personnel issues. Don't really know the details in that. Clearly, he had a track record of issues.
So here's a question for you: how's he getting all these jobs with this record that he's got?
Well, I'm wondering, because he had a criminal history, and we know
pretty extensive. This isn't like I had a bunch of parking tickets and I had a marijuana charge.
Right.
He had a pretty...
Yeah, he was wanted for assaulting a police officer.
Yeah, that's a pretty extensive record.
And then we also know, and I'm not trying to, I keep bringing it up, but I don't mean to bring it up in that way, but Tracy did have a slight, criminal history. So maybe Vaughn Foods
just didn't do a background check,
right?
And maybe
or maybe they did,
or
maybe they were trying to do community service by hiring people coming out of jail to give them a fresh start, or maybe in that area for the wages that they paid, maybe that was the type of workers that they received. I don't know. I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah,
we're not from the area. We don't know.
We're going to get a lot of emails about that.
Well, I just think maybe it's more of a work release type of maybe they fresh start type of place.
I'm going with the fact that they probably didn't do
background checks,
like a background check. Yeah, and
we're
only talking about 2.5 years ago.
It's hard to get a job today without most places without some form of background check.
But maybe it's a smaller outfit. They're not publicly traded, probably, so they're not required to do.
Yeah, it's a family business,
Family business. They're probably not required to do background check. My wife and I do a lot of shopping online, and we always use Rakuten. Rakuten is the smartest way to save money when you shop because you earn cash back at over 3,500 stores. We're talking fashion, beauty, electronics, home essentials, travel, dining, concert tickets, and more. Your favorite stores like Macy's, Nike, Sephora, Dyson, and Lowe's. And that's just to name a few. Pay Rakuten to send them shoppers. And Rakuten then passes on a part of that payment to its members as cashback. Cashback is deposited directly into your PayPal account, or Rakuten can send you a check. You can even maximize your savings by stacking cash back on top of other deals, like store sales and coupons. You're already shopping at your favorite stores. Why not save while you're doing it? It really is a no-brainer. Membership is free, and it's easy to sign up. Get the Rakuten app now and join the 17 million members who are already saving. Cashback rates change daily. See Rakuten.com for details. That's Rakuten. Your cash back really adds up. Hey folks, see if you've ever had this problem. You're trying to eat a little healthier, but you're in the grocery store aisle, you're looking at packaging, nutrition labels, and they're so confusing, you don't know what's good for you and what's not. Well, this is why I love Thrive Market, my go-to online grocery store for getting all of my healthy essentials delivered, and I don't even have to leave my couch. Finding better options for the whole family is easy with Thrive Market's Healthy Swap Scanner. Just scan a product, and it instantly recommends healthier swaps. This is how my wife and I found our new favorite snack, IQ bars. Sometimes I eat one in the morning with my coffee, sometimes just later on in between meals. They also have so many on-site filters that make it simple to shop by the needs of everyone in the family. Maybe you have someone who needs gluten-free food, somebody that has a peanut allergy. Well, no more scouring ingredient labels when you can just filter it all on Thrive Market. My wife and I often use the high protein filter to stock up on things like Sieti chips. Ready to make the switch? Go to thrivemarket.com/TCAT for 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/TCATT, thrivemarket.com/TCAT. So Gibby, now we're in the aftermath stage of this incident. And it's, the incident was bad. There's no way around that.
Terrible.
What Alton Nolen did was just horrible. He ruined people's lives. I mean, he killed a woman, and then he ruined, even Tracy's life was probably, I don't want to call it ruined, but it was, I'm sure she was scarred for life. And even people that weren't hurt, I imagine they had, it affected them emotionally.
Tracy's even said that, she attempted to try to go back to work, but she basically went to work. When she returned, she walked in and basically ran out and went home and decided to never return again. And I get that. I don't know, to go through what she went through, to see what she saw. I don't know how you could ever go back to that place.
I think it'd be tough to go back.
Yeah. Yeah. And clearly, I mean, she couldn't thank the CEO of the Mark Vaughn. She was absolutely so thankful for what he did. But even knowing that he's there, she still just couldn't go there anymore after going through what she went through. So I get that.
I don't blame her one bit.
And I don't know how you really return to any workplace after going through that. And I don't know if she has or not since then. I think it would be difficult to ever feel safe anywhere for that.
In the aftermath, what became the biggest issue of this case was Nolen's religion.
Well, sure, right? You had the religion part because he did get in trouble at work for talking about, trying to convert people to become Muslims.
Right.
But at the same time, he was also saying he doesn't like white people, right? So you got the race aspect to it as well.
Right. And there's one thing that, and I saved this to the end, towards the end of the podcast, but it really happened several months before the incident. And that's that he'd actually, Alton had changed his name on Facebook to Yaquim Yisrael. So he had adopted a Muslim name, which there's nothing wrong with. People do that all the time.
Sure.
In the Muslim religion.
But I think it's, and I know you're going to cover it, and I think has to do with a lot of the Facebook posts, social media posts that he starts putting out there, right? I mean, he's slowly dropping these different posts of more of the Islamic, anti-American. He's showing pictures of beheadings. He's showing the 9/11 pictures and
got
praising.
He's got the Twin Towers burning on 9/11.
Yeah, and praising the action of that.
He's got a picture of himself at a mosque in Oklahoma City.
Right.
And apparently he's making a hand sign of an ISIS fighter. So
right.
these are all posts from his Facebook page.
Yeah, I mean,
you said
Osama bin Laden on one of them.
Right. Other ISIS commanders. And on these, when he's posting these pictures, he's also making comments that are saying, like, some of my Muslim brothers. Well, these are some of the people that hate America the most when you're talking about Osama bin Laden and other ISIS commanders. And he's saying, these are my Muslim brothers. He's obviously showing a lot of anti-American sentiment at this point.
And he even makes, he also discusses the Jewish religion. Well, I guess I used the word discuss for it, I guess, right? So he talks about that on his post. And some of the other strange things that he posts on his Facebook, right? He actually posts that he's born in Jerusalem, Israel. I mean, he puts that out there.
We know it's not true.
Right. And he puts other weird things out there, that he graduated from high school in 2011, yet he graduated from college in 2007.
Yeah, I saw that too.
I mean, it's bizarre.
Yeah, he was acting very strange. We talked about the fact that it would come out that he, before the incident, had been trying to convert several employees to the Muslim religion. Apparently, after the event or the incident, he told law enforcement officials that he had been spending a lot of time watching videos of beheadings online before the incident occurred. He's watched, what type of videos show beheadings. He's watching ISIL or ISIS type videos. That's what I read, and that was big. You remember that before?
Because at that time, I think there were two American. I don't know if they were journalists or
and they actually you could view them
right on YouTube
if you could stomach it. Yeah, you could view them on YouTube, and apparently he was, and I don't want to say cheering on. He might have been cheering on,
right?
From everything that I read.
So the FBI is brought in,
yes,
to help determine, is this a race crime? Is it just a crime?
A terrorist?
Is it a terrorist crime?
Yeah,
so
because I don't think they were sure at this point, and I'm not sure if it wasn't a combination of all of it. I think it has elements of racial motivation. I think it has elements of terroristic motivation.
Right. I don't think he came back
religious
as a terrorist. I don't think he did. I think there's a workplace violence. I think because he made the comments, I think it was probably more racial, that he was upset with these two women and this HR person, that he almost lost his job. I think he took some of the Islamic terrorism methods that he learned and utilize those.
Well, yeah, I get what you're saying. I think the reason for what happened was not because he wanted to be a terrorist. I don't believe that. I think it was revenge.
Right.
He was upset, but the fact that he had been watching these videos of, ISIS beheadings, and the fact that he beheads Colleen Hufford,
right?
It just made for a huge national media story, and they were interviewing people at the mosque that he attended, and it was confirmed that he had begun worshiping at one of the mosques there in I think Oklahoma City in May. They said he wasn't very outgoing. People described his behavior as odd and said that he was a little weird, but that his behavior didn't really raise any red flags. I guess Nolen had attended services where at least this is what the director of the Islamic Society of Greater Oklahoma City said, was that Nolen attended services where sermons were delivered against beheadings, like those committed by ISIS militants, and that Nolen's actions did not reflect the beliefs of Islam.
And that was from the Saeed Muhammad?
Yeah, that was Saeed Muhammad. So I did find an interview online that I want to play, and this is from a person that stated that they attended.
Contradicts the statement,
it
right?
It does contradict it a little bit, but this person states that they attended that same mosque with Alton Nolen.
I observed the teachings of Islam. It took 2 years to learn what I know about Islam today. To the public, the mosque will not promote terrorism or any kind of radical acts. But when they're among friends and congregants only, they will promote the true teachings of Islam, which include the offer to non-Muslims, the choice rather, that you must convert, live under Islamic rule, or be fought against. Jihad fi sabilillah, jihad for the sake of Allah. When I was attending the mosque, I was specifically told, for example, concerning suicide bombings in Israel, that we do support these acts because, as it was told to me, this is the only weapon the Palestinians have, but do not mention this to the media because they would not understand. The only time that beheadings were discussed was in the means of which you confront the infidel, as it is related to in the Quran, that when you meet the unbelievers, you should smite at their necks.
Contradicts a little bit. Now, again, I don't know how accurate this is. I don't know if this person really attended the mosque or not, but this was a credible news outlet that this was on. I didn't just pull this like a rant from somebody. This was an actual interview,
right,
from a credible news show. But the one thing that I took away from it was the fact that he stated in the Quran, it talks about, the infidels and smiting at their necks. And I think that's where a lot of that, the beheading and that kind of behavior comes from, that interpretation, I guess.
Right.
That's the only thing I can
And I think that's why there was so much argument on many sides, with the FBI, with the prosecution, with the Attorney General's office, with other agencies. Some thought it was radical Islam.
Yeah, radicalization, I think.
Radicalization, terrorism style. Others thought it was racially motivated. Some just said, hey, it was just a workplace violence, action.
And even if it was, and I think this is where we see a lot of issues when you talk about religion, because you're talking about one individual that did something, and you have to be very careful of painting with a broad brush all of the people that practice that religion. And sometimes the media doesn't do a great job of that. I want to make sure that we don't do that. We're not painting
Oh no, not at all.
Muslims in a bad light whatsoever. We're
There's
simply given the, telling the story as it
Right.
as it unfolded.
yeah,
But,
radicals in every facet.
yeah, I mean, you can look at every race, religion, every segment of the population, and you have certain people out of every one of those segments that
I
has
mean-
the ability to do something bad.
I mean, a clear example is we're in Oklahoma here. So we have the Oklahoma bombing, which was radical, but it wasn't Islam. It was radical, a Christian radical that, blew up the FBI building.
Yeah, Timothy McVeigh.
Yeah.
Right.
Back in, I forget the year now, but
It's been a long time ago.
yeah. But, there was a radical extremist on the other side of the fence. So, they look at this case, and I think ultimately they come down to what, Mike? That it's not terrorism.
And I don't think it was. I don't know what you think, and really what we think doesn't matter a whole
No,
hell of a lot.
I think they got it right. I don't think it was an act of terrorism.
I think it was a series of events, the suspension. Now, I won't say that some of the radicalization may not have played into it. I mean, if this guy's watching the beheading videos and he's starting to look at Osama bin Laden and other ISIS commanders as what's the word I want to use as
I get you.
idols. I mean, that has to play some part in it, but I'm not sure that Alton Nolen would have gone out and done something.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the motivating factor that got him there.
Right.
Once he was there, I don't know if that kind of took over at that point. Then I don't think that was the motivation. I think when he was there, I know that even Tracy makes the mention that when he went to run towards her, he does say something in Arabic.
Yeah, you're right about that.
But she doesn't remember what it was. But that's not the motivation behind the crime. Was the fact that he wanted to go there and take care of the people that turned him in.
Revenge.
For revenge.
Yeah, I think the motivation was revenge. But when he gets there, he doesn't just stab Colleen Hufford.
No, he uses methods that he's learned from watching online videos.
Right. Now, do you call that I don't call that a terrorist attack.
No.
It's just the method that he used.
Right.
But, I mean, it's heinous nonetheless. So.
Absolutely it is.
I mean, let's talk a little bit about what ultimately happened. Alton Nolen is charged with murder and 5 other felony counts. This is where things start to get, I shouldn't say start. This is where things get, weird in a different way, because now he's in the judicial system. He's already, he's in jail, and they're trying to prosecute him, and he wants to plead guilty. But the judge doesn't let him plead guilty because he's just not, the judge, from what I read, is not sure that Alton Nolen fully understands the consequences of his guilty plea.
And I think she also wanted to be sure, she wanted to make sure she took the cautious route. So when the verdict was rendered, that there was no chance for him to have a retrial. She didn't want to put Colleen's family and Tracy through something like that again.
Yeah.
So I think she says she was erring on caution to make sure that there's going to be no future retrial.
So the strange part about this is it's still going on. I mean, this has not been resolved. Obviously, he's in custody as of, I think it was August 2016. The psychologists and the lawyers were still going back and forth and arguing about his mental state and whether he was fully competent to stand trial. A couple of things that I read were that Nolen had refused to cooperate with his attorneys because he kind of thought that they were part of some big conspiracy along with the judge to do him in, which I don't know how they could be. He's already done in. He did himself in. He wants to plead guilty, but I read that he wasn't a very good defendant in the fact that he wasn't willing to work with his defense attorneys. The defense, they have to mount a defense, obviously, in every case. That they tried to frame it as though their client was mentally incompetent, and then on the other side, prosecutors are saying no, he's difficult to deal with, but he's definitely competent. I think the prosecution believed that he was competent from the get-go.
And they're going for the death penalty, right? On this one?
I don't.
I kind of thought they were going for the death penalty.
I don't know why they wouldn't. If this should be a case that would warrant the death penalty.
I would think so.
Right now, there's really nothing going on until the judge is satisfied that his mental state is such that he fully understands what he's doing by entering this guilty plea. From what I read, the prosecution basically thinks that as soon as it comes back that he's competent, the judge is going to accept the guilty plea, and then they're going to move forward with the sentencing.
I just think it's crazy that it's taken this long to get to that point.
I did too, and I actually read a quote from this guy named Garvin Isaacs. He's a defense attorney, and he's actually the president of the Oklahoma Bar Association. So, obviously he's a well-respected attorney in Oklahoma. And he said it's very, very unusual for a judge to reject a guilty plea in a case. But he goes on to say, in this case, he believes that what the judge did was right, and that a re-examination of Alton Nolen's mental state is worth it, worth taking the time, I guess, to extend the time frame to make sure that
so no verdict gets overturned.
Yes, basically what you said. I just went in a much longer fashion.
Said it better.
in a different way. And I don't know if you read anything else, Gibby, but as far as I could find out, I mean, there's really no timetable.
No, we're just going to have to follow back up with it and give an update, if anything ever develops from it.
Yeah, because I couldn't even find where his next when his next competency evaluation was due.
Right.
And obviously everything moving forward hinges on that. But yeah, I agree. We can stick an update on the end of a future episode.
Right.
We kind of keep an eye on it. So Gibby, you got anything else?
No, I think this was interesting, and with a little bit of what's the word I want to use? A little bit of with the difference, if it's a racial, if it's a workplace, if it's terrorism, it had a little spin on it.
Yeah, it's a different type of case for us, right? It's one murder, and then attacking somebody else, but and those things are bad. Yep. But what I think drew me into the case was all these ancillary things, around it, where you have him getting in trouble and battering this police woman. I really found that interesting.
Right. Just seems like a bad kid, bad young man.
Oh, he's a bad guy.
With rage issues.
I think that's a given. But when you've got this police officer that is looking back at 2010 saying, yeah, I had a right to shoot this guy because we were struggling and he was,
I'm sure
fighting
she feels she shouldn't feel any guilt, but she probably feels like maybe I should have shot him, and these two people would be, Colleen would be alive, and Tracy would not be traumatized for the rest of her life.
And I don't know if that the police woman ever has come out and said that, but it wouldn't surprise me that in moments alone with other people, she would say that,
Right.
you know, I should have shot this individual, and if I would have, then none of this would happen. Like we talked, like you talked about, the other interesting piece is really the race versus religion versus revenge, and examining that and taking a look and seeing which one is it. I think we have it right.
Right. So I'm curious with the listeners, and maybe they'll let us know either on your Facebook or your Instagram or your Twitter. How do you like these cases? You know, we do the big ones, right? We do some of these more well-known ones, but these ones that are lesser known but interesting, you know, do they like them? I think I'd like to hear that feedback, and along with that, I'd love some feedback on what they think was the motivation behind this terrible murder.
Yeah, you and I talk about it all the time. We love the interaction with the listeners, and we kind of said it from the beginning, right? We talked about trying to do a mix of, we're going to do the big ones, but you can't rush through all the big ones. You can't do Bundy, Gacy, Dahmer back to back to back.
Right. It's
and a lot of people have said they enjoy some of these ones that they've never heard of, or maybe they kind of remember them, but they don't know the details. And then some people really like what I always call the big timers. And we're going to do all of them. Don't worry about that. You know, we're going to do Ed Gein, and we're going to do John Wayne Gacy, and because we're going to do Zodiac. You know, we're going to do Zodiac because that's my all-time favorite.
That's probably a 5-parter.
But I don't know how many that'll take. In between, you know, we try to find some of these cases that are interesting and less well known. But I like your idea, Mike. You know, let us know, because we're only here to do to give the audience what they want.
Right.
Now we can't please everybody all the time, and we've found that out pretty quickly.
Right.
There's some people that like some of the things that we do, and some don't like some of the other things that we do.
But that's all right, you know. At least they tell us.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So anyway, let's wrap up this episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening. You know, as always, stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Shopify's point-of-sale system helps you sell at every stage of your business. Need a fast and secure way to take payments in person? We've got you covered. How about card readers you can rely on anywhere you sell?
Thanks. Have a good one.
Yep, that too. Want one place to manage all your online and in-person sales? That's kind of our thing. Wherever you sell, businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 a month trial at shopify.com/listen. Shopify.com/listen.